The wedding of the year glittered beneath the chandeliers of Beverly Hills Grand Hotel. Champagne flutes sparkled in manicured hands, violins filled the marble hall with gentle music, and waiters in white gloves glided across the room carrying trays of caviar and golden macarons. At the center of it all stood Ryan Mitchell, tall, handsome, smug, and dressed in a custom tuxedo. Tonight, he wasn't just marrying his new bride Vanessa Brooks, a glamorous young model. He was determined to humiliate the one woman he despised the most, Emily Carter, his ex-wife. Only a year ago, she had been the quiet wife by his side, carrying his child and praying for a happy family. But when life turned harsh and she could no longer hide her struggles, Ryan discarded her like trash. He filed for divorce, took their house, emptied the accounts, and left her alone and pregnant with triplets. The whispers around town said she was ruined, powerless, and forgotten. That was exactly how Ryan wanted it. So when he mailed her an invitation to his grand wedding, it wasn't out of kindness. It was bait. He wanted her to walk into the ballroom looking poor and broken so every guest could laugh. He wanted the world to see the difference between his glittering success and her supposed misery. "Let her come crawling," he bragged to his friends. "Let them see how far she's fallen. It will make me look even greater." But Ryan had underestimated Emily's spirit. The same woman he once mocked as weak had endured sleepless nights with 3 newborns, survived cruel gossip, and swallowed every tear until her heart turned into steel. She didn't plan to crawl into his wedding. If she went, she would walk tall. She would not arrive alone. The night grew tense as rumors spread through the ballroom. Some whispered that Emily would never dare to show up. Others chuckled, imagining her slipping through the back door with borrowed clothes. Vanessa smirked, certain that her presence would crush Emily completely. Ryan raised his glass, already savoring the triumph of the humiliation he had prepared. Then the hotel doors swung open. Gasps spread like fire through the room. A stretch limousine had just pulled up outside, and out stepped Emily Carter. No longer the tired, abandoned woman people remembered. She wore an elegant gown that shimmered beneath the chandeliers, her hair swept back like a queen, her steps graceful and unshaken. At her side walked Alexander Harrington, one of the city's most mysterious billionaires, his presence commanding, his hand resting protectively on Emily's back. And behind them, 3 little children in matching tuxedos and dresses followed, wide-eyed and innocent. Triplets. Ryan's children. The music faltered, champagne glasses froze midair. Whispers turned into stunned silence, and Ryan's smug smile disappeared for the very first time. Before the dazzling entrance that shook the Beverly Hills wedding, Emily Carter's life had been carved out of shadows and sacrifice. She was not born into privilege. She grew up in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Phoenix, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. From an early age, Emily learned to value simple things: warm meals, secondhand clothes, and the kind of love that was measured not in diamonds but in sacrifices. At 22, Emily believed she had found her fairy tale when she met Ryan Mitchell. He was older, confident, a rising businessman with smooth words and an easy smile. To Emily, he seemed like a savior. He promised her the life she never had. A home of comfort, a family built on stability, and dreams bigger than her world had ever allowed. Against her mother's quiet warnings, Emily gave him her heart, and soon after, her vows. The early days of their marriage seemed beautiful. Ryan spoiled her with flowers, whispered promises of forever, and swore he adored her innocence. Emily, believing in love with all her soul, became the perfect wife. She gave up her small job as a receptionist to support Ryan's career, managing their home and caring for every detail of his life. She thought love meant sacrifice. She thought her loyalty would be enough. But as Ryan's wealth and ambition grew, his warmth faded. He no longer looked at Emily as his partner, but as dead weight. When Emily became pregnant, news that filled her with joy and trembling hope, Ryan's true nature revealed itself. Instead of celebrating, he scoffed at her. "You can't even provide for yourself," he sneered. "How will you provide for 3? Because fate had written its own cruel twist, Emily was carrying triplets. What should have been a miracle became her greatest burden. The medical bills, the exhaustion, the fear. Emily faced it all alone. Ryan stopped coming home, stopped answering calls, and eventually pushed her out of their house with nothing but a suitcase and a breaking heart. While he flaunted his success in glittering suits and expensive cars, Emily slept on a friend's couch, clutching her swelling belly, whispering promises to the children inside her. "I will protect you, no matter what." The nights were long. Tears became her only lullaby. She worked part-time jobs while heavily pregnant, scrubbing offices and folding clothes in laundromats to save every dollar for diapers. Strangers stared, some pitied, some mocked. Her body ached, her spirit cracked, but she never surrendered. Every kick in her womb reminded her that her fight wasn't just for herself. It was for 3 little souls who needed her strength. When the babies were born, 2 boys and 1 girl, Emily's world shifted again. The exhaustion doubled, but so did her courage. She rocked them to sleep while hiding her tears, humming lullabies her mother once sang. She fed them with trembling hands, sometimes skipping meals herself so they would have enough. Poverty pressed hard, but love made her unbreakable. The world may have called her a poor, discarded ex-wife. Ryan may have laughed at her misery, but Emily Carter carried something far stronger than money or status: resilience. It was that resilience, sharpened by pain and polished by sacrifice, that would one day make her entrance into Ryan's wedding not a moment of humiliation, but of triumph. Because the girl he abandoned had become a woman he could never destroy. The Beverly Hills Grand Hotel was a palace disguised as a hotel. Its ballroom stretched wider than a football field, lined with marble pillars and chandeliers dripping with 1,000 crystals. Tonight, every inch of it was designed not just for celebration, but for spectacle. Ryan Mitchell wanted his wedding to Vanessa Brooks to scream wealth, power, and triumph. He wanted every guest to know that he had risen to the top, leaving his pitiful past and his poor ex-wife far behind. Gold-trimmed invitations had been sent weeks earlier to the city's elite: investors, politicians, celebrities, and business magnates. The event had been featured in lifestyle magazines, hyped as the union of the season. Reporters clustered outside, their cameras ready to capture each luxurious detail. Limousines lined the driveway, delivering guests dressed in couture gowns and tuxedos that cost more than a year's rent for ordinary families. Inside, the air buzzed with shallow laughter and champagne toasts. Waiters in white gloves circled with trays of oysters and lobster tails, while a string quartet filled the air with Mozart. At the head of the hall stood Ryan, flashing the smug smile of a man who believed he had won at life. His arm draped proudly around Vanessa, a vision in her designer gown, sparkling diamonds and smug confidence. Vanessa, 26, basked in the attention. Once a minor model struggling for recognition, she now stood beside a wealthy groom in a wedding worth millions. She leaned into Ryan, whispering sweet nothings and smirking as if the ballroom was her personal stage. The cameras loved her, and she loved every flash. She didn't care that whispers about Ryan's ex-wife lingered in the corners. In fact, she hoped Emily would come. Vanessa longed to see her rival crumble in public. Ryan's groomsmen clapped him on the back, congratulating him on his upgrade. Guests raised their glasses, not just to celebrate love, but to cement alliances, to secure future deals. In this glittering hall, everything had a price: love, loyalty, even dignity. And Ryan reveled in it. He raised his champagne flute high and declared, "Tonight, I leave the past behind me. Only success lies ahead." But the truth was, Ryan hadn't invited Emily just to flaunt his new life. He wanted a show. He wanted to prove that while he soared, she had sunk. He wanted her presence to serve as a living reminder of his superiority. Some guests, aware of the bitter divorce, snickered at the thought of Emily arriving in a second-hand dress, perhaps looking frail, tired, and broken. "She'll probably come begging," Ryan joked earlier that evening, and we'll all laugh. The orchestra swelled as the ceremony prepared to begin. The officiant stood ready, the flower arrangements perfumed the air, and the ballroom brimmed with anticipation. Yet beneath the glamour, a quiet tension simmered. Everyone wondered, would Emily come? By the grand entrance doors, a hush suddenly rippled through the crowd. A valet rushed inside, whispering something to the maitre d'. The music faltered. Heads turned toward the golden doors, waiting, wondering. Ryan smirked, convinced that his trap was about to spring. Vanessa's smile widened, hungry for the spectacle. Guests leaned forward, curious and eager for drama. None of them knew that the woman about to step through those doors would not be the broken, pitiful ex-wife they expected. She would be the storm that shattered their perfect illusion. Ryan Mitchell had perfected the art of deception. To the guests in the Beverly Hills ballroom, he looked like the ideal groom. Charming, successful, a man who had climbed the ladder of wealth and claimed the ultimate prize, a glamorous young wife. But beneath the tuxedo and rehearsed smile hid a man whose ambition had always been fueled by cruelty. Ryan's journey to success wasn't paved with hard work alone. It was carved from betrayal, shortcuts, and broken promises. When he married Emily years ago, he had little more than a modest salary and big dreams. Emily's quiet devotion, her willingness to sacrifice, gave him stability. But as soon as his career started to take off, Ryan began to see her as baggage. He complained about her plain looks, mocked her for not keeping up with his wealthy colleagues' wives, and belittled her every effort to hold the family together. When Emily revealed she was carrying triplets, Ryan's mask slipped entirely. Instead of joy, his eyes filled with calculation. 3 children meant more expenses, more responsibility, less freedom to chase wealth and pleasure. "You've ruined my life," he spat one night, slamming the door as she cried on the floor. From then on, his visits home grew fewer, his excuses grew wilder, until he finally threw her out. To him, Emily was just a chapter he wanted erased. Enter Vanessa Brooks, the glittering replacement. Vanessa was everything Emily was not, at least in Ryan's eyes. She was young, glamorous, and came from a wealthy circle. To the public, she was a rising model, often photographed at fashion events with champagne in hand. But behind the makeup and designer gowns was a woman as calculating as Ryan himself. She saw in him not love, but opportunity. With Ryan, she could secure the lifestyle she craved. The diamonds, the yachts, the mansion parties. It was Vanessa who encouraged Ryan to flaunt his new life, who sneered at the very mention of Emily. "Invite her," she whispered when the wedding plans began. "Let her see what she lost. Let everyone see what you gained." Her cruelty wasn't just about proving herself superior, it was about crushing any threat to her new position as Mrs. Mitchell. Together, Ryan and Vanessa were a perfect storm of arrogance and greed. They fed off each other's vanity, blind to the whispers around them. Some guests admired their boldness, others shook their heads, sensing disaster. But neither Ryan nor Vanessa cared. They believed they were untouchable, above judgment, destined for a life of endless indulgence. As Ryan paraded Vanessa around the ballroom, his laughter rang hollow, but his pride swelled with every envious glance. He relished the thought of Emily walking in, pale and frail, confirming to the world that he had upgraded. Vanessa clung to his arm, her diamond bracelet catching the light, her eyes gleaming with cruel anticipation. They thought they had scripted the perfect play. Emily as the tragic figure, Ryan as the triumphant groom, Vanessa as the dazzling prize. But the story they tried to write was about to collapse, because the woman they had dismissed as weak had transformed. And the empire they flaunted was built on sand, waiting for the tide to wash it all away. And tonight, that tide was coming. The plan to humiliate Emily wasn't just born out of Ryan's arrogance. It was carefully crafted, whispered in late-night conversations between him and Vanessa. While florists arranged roses and planners rehearsed the timing of the ceremony, Ryan and Vanessa plotted cruelty behind closed doors. "Are you sure she'll come?" Vanessa asked one evening as they lounged in their penthouse suite. She sipped champagne, her diamond ring glinting in the city lights. "She'll come," Ryan replied confidently. "Emily's too proud to ignore the invitation, and even if she doesn't want to, curiosity will eat her alive. She'll want to see me. See what she lost." Vanessa smirked. "Good, because when she walks through those doors, she'll realize she doesn't belong here. And everyone else will realize it too." They rehearsed the moment in their heads. Ryan imagined Emily slipping in, dressed in something outdated, maybe clutching a handbag she bought from a discount store. He pictured her standing awkwardly at the edge of the ballroom, while photographers snapped pictures of him with Vanessa in her glittering gown. It would be perfect. An unspoken comparison that painted Emily as pathetic and Vanessa as victorious. But Vanessa wanted more than just comparison. She wanted destruction. "Let's make sure the press notices her," she suggested. I'll tell the photographers where to look. We'll smile for the cameras with her standing right there, invisible beside us. She'll look like a ghost from your past, haunting your success." Ryan loved the idea. "And after the vows, I'll make a toast," he added. "Something subtle, something that thanks everyone who supported me when others couldn't. Everyone will know I'm talking about her. They'll laugh behind their glasses of champagne, and she'll crumble." Their cruelty deepened with every word. Vanessa giggled, imagining Emily's tears. Ryan grinned, savoring the thought of his ex-wife shrinking under the weight of his staged triumph. For them, the wedding wasn't about love. It was about power, about proving that they had won and Emily had lost. Even the seating arrangements reflected their malice. Ryan instructed the planner to keep a chair empty near the back, just in case the ex-wife shows up. He told the caterer to make note of it too. Vanessa, with a wicked sparkle in her eye, ensured that the table closest to that chair was filled with gossip-hungry socialites who would waste no time spreading whispers. By the morning of the wedding, the plan was set. Ryan stood before the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks, smiling at his reflection. "Tonight," he told himself, "I erase her completely." Vanessa, slipping into her gown, whispered, "And tonight I become the only Mrs. Mitchell anyone will ever remember." Neither of them imagined that their stage, polished with gold and champagne, was about to collapse under the weight of truth. Because Emily was not walking into their trap as the broken woman they expected. She was walking in with a strength they had never seen, and with allies powerful enough to turn their cruel plan into their ultimate downfall. The trap they set for Emily was about to snap shut. But not on her. On them. The night before Ryan's wedding, Emily sat on the edge of a worn sofa in her tiny apartment, her head in her hands. The room was dimly lit by a single lamp, its flickering bulb casting long shadows on the peeling wallpaper. Around her, toys were scattered across the floor, baby bottles sat half-empty on the counter, and the faint cries of her triplets drifted from the bedroom. She rocked slowly, exhaustion heavy in her bones. Life had not been kind since Ryan had thrown her out. She had scraped by, piecing together part-time jobs just to keep food on the table. She scrubbed offices at night, folded clothes at a laundromat during the day, and babysat for neighbors whenever she could. Her hands were cracked from cleaning chemicals, her back ached from long shifts, and her eyes burned from nights without sleep. The world seemed eager to remind her of her failure. Former friends avoided her calls, whispering that she had married above her station and gotten what she deserved. Strangers glanced at her belly and later at her stroller with judgment in their eyes. 3 children, no husband, no money. Even at the grocery store, she felt the sting of pity when she used food stamps to buy formula. That night, as she tucked her children into bed, she couldn't stop the tears from streaming down her cheeks. "I promise my babies," she whispered, brushing soft hair from their foreheads, "I won't let you grow up thinking you're not wanted. Even if I have to break, I will never let you feel abandoned." But inside, she was breaking. The invitation to Ryan's wedding sat on the kitchen table, its gold trim gleaming mockingly in the dim light. She had almost thrown it away the day it arrived. Yet here it was, a cruel reminder that while she struggled to survive, Ryan lived in luxury, celebrating with chandeliers and champagne. She knew the invitation wasn't about courtesy, it was about cruelty. He wanted her there, wanted her humiliated. She pressed the card to her chest and sobbed, torn between fury and despair. A part of her wanted to burn it, to refuse him the satisfaction, but another part, deeper and stronger, whispered that she couldn't run forever. She had spent too long hiding, too long shrinking from the world's judgment. Maybe it was time to face it, no matter how painful. Still, fear gripped her. She imagined walking into that ballroom in her plain dress, clutching her children, every pair of eyes judging, every laugh piercing her like knives. She imagined Ryan smirking, Vanessa's cruel smile, the guests whispering, "There's the poor ex-wife. Look how far she's fallen." Her heart ached with shame. She wasn't sure she could endure it. That night, as the rain tapped against her window, Emily curled up on the sofa and let the weight of her life crush her. She cried until her throat burned, until the exhaustion dragged her into restless sleep. In her dreams, she saw Ryan's face, sneering, telling her she was nothing. She saw Vanessa laughing, dripping in jewels. And she saw herself, alone, broken, invisible. Emily didn't know it yet. But the storm she felt inside was the very fire that would soon carry her into the ballroom, not as a victim, but as a force neither Ryan nor Vanessa could ever silence. Because rock bottom wasn't her ending. It was the beginning of her rise. Morning light filtered weakly through the thin curtains of Emily's apartment, highlighting the exhaustion etched into her face. She had barely slept, her mind looping between fear of humiliation and the quiet rage burning in her chest. Her triplets stirred in their crib, tiny hands reaching out, reminding her of the only reason she kept going. She bent to kiss each of them, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. A knock at the door startled her. She hesitated, pulling her worn sweater tighter. Visitors were rare. When she opened the door, she froze. Standing in the hallway was Alexander Harrington. Emily knew of him. Everyone in the city did. He was the elusive billionaire investor who rarely appeared in public outside of charity events. Tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes that carried the weight of too many storms, Alexander was a figure both admired and feared. She had seen his name in newspapers tied to powerful deals and hospital donations, but she never expected him to stand at her door. "Emily Carter?" His voice was calm, steady. "I hope I'm not intruding." Confused, she nodded. "Yes, that's me. But why are you here?" He glanced past her into the modest apartment, at the toys, the crib, the evidence of her struggle. For a moment his jaw tightened, then he met her eyes. "Because I know what he did to you, and because I've seen this story before." Emily stiffened, suspicion rising. "If Ryan sent you—" "Ryan didn't send me," Alexander interrupted firmly. "I'm here because I watched my own mother go through what you're living now. My father left her for another woman when she was sick. She died of cancer, alone. Years later, my wife—" His voice faltered just for a second before he forced himself to continue. "My wife fought cancer too. I did everything I could, but I still lost her. I know what it's like to watch someone you love suffer because of cruelty and betrayal, and I swore I would never stand by if I saw it happen again." Emily's breath caught. The hardness in his voice wasn't pity. It was pain, carved deep from his own scars. "I don't want your charity," she whispered, ashamed of the tremble in her tone. Alexander shook his head. "This isn't charity. This is justice. Ryan thinks he can parade his cruelty without consequence. He's wrong. You don't have to fight him alone." She stared at him, her heart torn between disbelief and a fragile hope she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Why would a man like him, with all his wealth and power, care about her? But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no judgment, no mockery, only recognition. As if her pain mirrored his own. "I can't walk into that wedding," Emily said, voice breaking. "Not like this. Not when he wants me to fall apart." "Then don't walk in as his victim," Alexander replied softly. "Walk in as the woman he underestimated. I'll make sure of it." The promise in his voice was ironclad. For the first time in years, Emily felt the faintest spark of strength return to her chest. What she didn't yet realize was that this man, broken by his own losses, rebuilt by compassion, was about to turn Ryan's cruel stage into the battlefield of his downfall. And Alexander Harrington never entered a battle he couldn't win. The days leading up to Ryan's wedding blurred together for Emily. Between caring for her triplets and battling the doubts clawing at her chest, she wondered if she had made a mistake even considering Alexander's offer. Every time she looked at the invitation on her table, she felt the weight of Ryan's cruelty pressing down. He wanted her humiliated. He wanted her broken. But Alexander Harrington wasn't a man who made empty promises. On the morning of the wedding, a sleek black limousine waited outside her apartment. Emily stared through the window in disbelief, clutching her children close. The neighbors peeked from their doors, whispering in shock. For the first time in years, she wasn't leaving the house with a stroller and worry lines. She was stepping into something extraordinary. "Emily," Alexander said, offering his hand as she approached, "today isn't about him. It's about you reclaiming your dignity. Let me help you show the world who you really are." Inside the limousine, the leather seats gleamed, soft music filled the air, and a stylist waited with racks of gowns. Emily gasped, "This is too much, I can't." Alexander shook his head. "You've given up enough. Let me give something back." The stylist guided her through the dresses, each more stunning than the last. At first, Emily hesitated, her fingers trembling as she touched the silks and satins. But when she slipped into a deep sapphire gown, the room seemed to shift. The fabric hugged her frame, the color illuminated her eyes, and for the first time in years she didn't see a tired mother in the mirror. She saw a woman reborn. Her children, dressed in tiny tuxedos and matching dresses, clapped their hands with innocent delight. "Mommy, you look like a princess!" one of the boys shouted, his voice pure with pride. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as she hugged them. They had only ever seen her in worn clothes and weary smiles. Tonight, they saw her strength shining. Makeup brushed away the shadows of sleepless nights. Soft curls framed her face. A diamond pendant, Alexander's quiet gift, rested on her collarbone, catching the light. She touched it nervously, but he said simply, "Consider it armor." As the limousine rolled toward the Beverly Hills Grand Hotel, Emily's nerves twisted. She imagined Ryan's smirk, Vanessa's laughter, the whispers of the crowd. Her palms dampened with fear. Alexander noticed. "Do you know what makes a storm powerful, Emily?" he asked quietly. She glanced at him, puzzled. "It doesn't ask permission, it just arrives. Tonight, you are that storm." She exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping her lips. For years she had been shrinking, hiding, trying to survive. But tonight, she would not hide. Tonight, she would walk into the ballroom not as Ryan's discarded ex-wife, but as the woman he never truly knew. The limousine slowed before the glowing entrance of the hotel. Photographers clustered outside, their cameras flashing at every arriving guest. The moment the doors opened, the crowd gasped. Emily stepped out, radiant, her children trailing like royal heirs, Alexander at her side exuding quiet power. For the first time in years, the world wasn't laughing at her. It was in awe. And inside, Ryan's perfect stage was about to become his greatest humiliation. The Beverly Hills Grand Hotel glittered like a kingdom of gold that night. Guests swirled across the ballroom in gowns and tuxedos, their laughter echoing under chandeliers heavy with crystals. The string quartet played a delicate tune as champagne flowed like water. To the elite gathered there, the night was a showcase of wealth and power. But within minutes, it would become something far more unforgettable. The golden doors at the entrance opened slowly, almost ceremoniously, and the first sound to break the music was the collective gasp of the crowd. Outside, a sleek black limousine had pulled up, its polished body reflecting the floodlights and camera flashes. Photographers pressed forward, their shouts rising above the music. "Who is it? Who's arriving now?" And then she stepped out. Emily Carter. No longer the weary mother scraping by in silence. No longer the discarded ex-wife Ryan believed she would always be. Tonight, she was a vision. Her sapphire gown shimmered with every step, her hair cascaded in soft curls, and her diamond pendant caught the light like a crown jewel. Her back was straight, her chin lifted, her eyes calm yet fierce. She carried herself with the grace of a queen who had nothing left to fear. The murmurs grew louder. "Is that her? Ryan's ex-wife? She looks incredible. I thought she was struggling." But Emily wasn't alone. Beside her walked Alexander Harrington, the enigmatic billionaire whose presence alone could silence a room. His dark suit was tailored to perfection, his hand resting gently yet protectively on Emily's back. The sight of him escorting her sent shockwaves rippling through the ballroom. Guests leaned in to whisper frantically, "Why is she with him? Alexander never brings anyone to these events. What does this mean?" And then, the final blow. 3 small figures emerged from the limousine. Emily's triplets, dressed in tiny tuxedos and a sparkling dress, their wide eyes reflecting innocence and pride. They clung to their mother's hands, oblivious to the chaos their presence caused. Gasps turned into stunned silence. Whispers hissed across the hall like fire. "They're his children. They look just like Ryan. My God, he abandoned them?" Inside the ballroom, Ryan's confident smirk froze on his lips. His champagne flute trembled slightly in his hand. For weeks, he had boasted about the humiliation Emily would bring upon herself if she dared show up. But as he watched her glide into the room with a billionaire at her side and 3 living reminders of his betrayal trailing behind, the humiliation was his. Vanessa's face hardened, her painted smile cracking at the edges. She gripped Ryan's arm, her nails digging into his sleeve. "What is she doing here? And with him?" she hissed. The orchestra faltered, missing notes as every musician turned their eyes toward the entrance. The ballroom, moments ago filled with laughter and vanity, had shifted into a stage of suspense. All eyes followed Emily as she stepped onto the polished marble floor, her heels clicking in rhythm with the pounding hearts around her. Emily did not rush. She did not shrink. She moved with steady confidence, her gaze fixed forward, ignoring the whispers, ignoring Ryan's pale face. She wasn't here to be their victim. She was here to reclaim her dignity. And as the doors closed behind her, sealing the silence, one truth became clear to everyone in that glittering hall. The woman they expected to pity had arrived as the one they could only admire. The silence in the ballroom stretched like glass ready to shatter. Emily stood tall in her sapphire gown, Alexander at her side, the triplets clinging to her hands. The whispers grew louder, a storm of curiosity and scandal. Ryan felt every pair of eyes drifting from him and Vanessa to the woman he had hoped to bury in shame. Rage burned through his chest. This was not the scene he had planned. She was supposed to appear small, weak, desperate. Instead, she had stolen the spotlight. His pride demanded action. He stepped forward, forcing a grin onto his face, raising his champagne glass. "Well, well," he said, his voice echoing across the marble floor. "Look who decided to show up. My ex-wife? How touching." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. His tone dripped with venom disguised as charm. Vanessa tightened her grip on his arm, smirking, encouraging him. Ryan moved closer, circling Emily like a predator. "Tell me, Emily, did you borrow that gown? Or perhaps Mr. Harrington here bought it for you? It must feel strange, doesn't it? Walking into a place like this after living in, what was it? A rundown apartment?" Laughter bubbled at the edges of the crowd, hesitant, unsure. Emily's heart hammered in her chest, but she refused to lower her eyes. She opened her mouth to respond, but Alexander's steady hand on her back stopped her. His calm presence told her, not yet. Ryan wasn't finished. He leaned closer, his voice sharper now. "And bringing the children? My God, Emily, was that for sympathy? Or did you hope someone here would take pity and write you a check?" A ripple of gasps spread through the guests. The cruelty of his words struck deep, echoing across the hall. The triplets clutched Emily tighter, sensing the tension. For a moment, Emily felt the old shame rise, the familiar sting of his mockery. But then she caught Alexander's eyes, steady, unshaken, and she remembered she was not alone. Before she could speak, Alexander stepped forward. His voice was calm, yet carried the weight of authority that silenced the entire room. "You speak of pity, Mr. Mitchell," he said, his gaze unwavering. "But what I see before me is not a woman to be pitied. I see a woman who has endured more than you could ever bear, and she has done it with dignity." Ryan's smirk faltered, but he forced a laugh. "And who are you to lecture me?" Alexander's lips curved into a cold smile. "I am the man who stands beside her when you chose to walk away. I am the man who sees her worth while you discarded it. And I am the man who will ensure the world knows the truth about the kind of husband you were." The room erupted in whispers. Vanessa paled, sensing the shift. Ryan's mask cracked, anger flashing across his face. "This is my wedding," he barked. "You don't belong here." Emily finally stepped forward, her voice steady, clear. "No, Ryan, you're wrong. I belong here more than you think. Because while you celebrate your new life, you can never erase me, or the children you abandoned. We are living proof of the man you truly are." Gasps filled the room. Guests turned, their eyes now sharp with judgment. Ryan opened his mouth to retort, but no words came. For the first time, he was the one left speechless. And in that silence, his carefully built empire of lies began to crack. The ballroom buzzed with uneasy whispers, the air thick with tension. Emily's words had struck like lightning, but it was Alexander who now commanded the storm. Standing tall, his presence radiated quiet authority, every gaze locked on him. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Enough," he snapped, his voice trembling with anger. "This circus ends now. Security." But Alexander raised a hand, silencing him effortlessly. "Before you try to throw her out, Mr. Mitchell," he said evenly, "perhaps you should worry about what I've brought with me tonight." The crowd shifted, curiosity sparking like wildfire. Guests craned their necks, eager for drama. Even the orchestra had gone silent, bows frozen midair. Ryan forced a laugh. "And what exactly have you brought? Pity? Empty speeches? This is my night, Harrington, not yours." Alexander's gaze sharpened, his tone steady but lethal. "What I have," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket, "is the truth." He pulled out a slim black folder and placed it on the nearest table. The hush in the room grew deeper. With deliberate calm, he opened it, revealing neatly stacked documents. "These," Alexander announced, his voice carrying across the hall, "are financial records. Records that prove Ryan Mitchell has been embezzling funds from his company for over 2 years." Gasps erupted. Glasses clinked against marble as guests exchanged shocked glances. A few pulled out their phones, already sending messages, hungry for the scandal. Ryan's face drained of color. "Lies," he shouted. "Those are fabricated. He's trying to slander me." But Alexander was relentless. Not fabricated, verified. Bank transfers routed through offshore accounts, shell companies masking losses, and stolen funds redirected into your personal lifestyle. Vacations, cars, even this wedding. He paused, his eyes locking onto Ryan's. "You invited Emily here to humiliate her. Instead, you invited her to witness your downfall." Vanessa clutched Ryan's arm, panic flickering in her eyes. "Ryan, is it true?" she whispered. "Of course not," he barked, jerking away from her. "He's bluffing." Alexander leaned forward, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Bluffing? Then why, Ryan, do I have signed correspondence between you and your accountant? Why do I have recordings of your phone calls authorizing these transfers?" The room exploded in whispers again. Investors shifted uneasily, their expressions hardening. Politicians slipped toward the exits, eager to distance themselves. Even Ryan's closest friends looked away, unwilling to be tainted by association. Emily stood still, her heart pounding. For years, she had dreamed of Ryan facing consequences, of the world finally seeing the cruelty she had endured. And now, in this glittering hall, justice was unfolding before her eyes. Ryan's mask cracked completely. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his voice rising in desperation. "This is a setup. He's trying to destroy me. You all know me. I built my empire with hard work." But no one believed him anymore. His voice, once commanding, sounded hollow, desperate, pathetic. Alexander straightened, closing the folder with quiet finality. "Hard work doesn't leave a trail of stolen millions, Mr. Mitchell. Your empire is built on lies, and tonight, those lies end." For a moment, the ballroom was silent, the weight of truth pressing down like a hammer. Then a guest near the front muttered, loud enough for others to hear, "He's finished." And just like that, the tide turned. The man who had orchestrated a night of humiliation for his ex-wife now stood exposed, trembling, his empire crumbling before the very people he sought to impress. And everyone in that glittering hall knew. They weren't watching a wedding anymore. They were watching a downfall. The room swirled with chaos. Whispers turned to accusations, once admiring eyes now sharp with disgust. Ryan Mitchell, who only minutes ago stood at the pinnacle of his self-made empire, was unraveling in front of the very audience he sought to impress. And beside him, Vanessa Brooks, his glittering bride, felt her perfect world begin to collapse. At first, she stood frozen, clutching his arm as though his strength might still shield her. But when Alexander's words sank deeper, and the documents spread like wildfire through curious hands, the truth became undeniable. The empire she thought she was marrying into was nothing more than stolen wealth, a house of cards trembling in the wind. Her grip loosened. Her eyes flicked nervously from guest to guest, reading their judgment, their disdain. The whispers stung worse than knives. She must have known. Gold digger. She chose him for his money, and now there's none left. Vanessa's stomach turned. This wasn't the life she had bargained for. She hadn't traded her youth and ambition to stand beside a ruined man. She had envisioned yachts, magazine covers, charity galas, and diamond-studded futures, not bankruptcy hearings and prison visits. "Ryan," she hissed under her breath, panic cracking her polished voice. "Tell me this isn't true. Tell me he's lying." Ryan's face twisted, desperation gnawing at him. "Of course it's not true. Don't listen to him." But she had already seen the sweat on his brow, the trembling in his hands, the emptiness in his eyes. She had seen men bluff before, and she knew the difference between confidence and collapse. Vanessa took a sharp step back, her heels clicking against the marble. Gasps followed the motion. Ryan's head whipped toward her. "What are you doing?" "I'm not going down with you," she snapped, her voice louder now, shaking but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I didn't sign up to marry a criminal." The crowd erupted, some in shock, others in smug satisfaction. For the first time that night, it wasn't Emily or Alexander who humiliated Ryan. It was the woman he had chosen over his wife. "Vanessa!" Ryan barked, his voice cracking. "Don't you dare walk away from me. You think you'll survive without me? You're nothing without my name." But Vanessa had already slipped the diamond ring from her finger. She held it up for all to see, her face cold, detached. "Your name is worth nothing now." And with that, she dropped the ring onto the marble floor. It clattered loudly, echoing through the stunned silence. Ryan lunged toward her, his face red with fury. "You ungrateful." But security, sensing the shift in the room, stepped between them. Vanessa turned on her heel, her gown sweeping behind her, her heels clicking like gunshots as she stormed out of the ballroom. Photographers scrambled after her, flashing bulbs capturing her betrayal for tomorrow's headlines. Ryan stood frozen, chest heaving, his bride gone, his empire exposed, his dignity shredded in front of hundreds. And Emily watched it all, her children holding her hands tightly. For years she had carried the weight of Ryan's cruelty, the shame of being cast aside. But now, in front of everyone, the man who tried to erase her was being erased himself, piece by piece. And the knife that cut deepest wasn't wielded by Emily or Alexander. It was wielded by the woman Ryan had once believed would crown his triumph. The ballroom had never been so silent. Vanessa's footsteps had barely faded before every eye turned back to Ryan, and then to Emily. She stood steady in her sapphire gown, her triplets pressed close against her sides. The crowd waited, breathless, sensing that the storm was not yet over. Ryan tried to regain control. He straightened his tuxedo, forcing a bitter laugh. "You people are fools," he spat. "You believe these lies? This is nothing but jealousy. Jealousy from a bitter ex-wife and a bored billionaire. Don't forget, she's nothing without me." Emily's fingers tightened around her children's hands. For years, those words had poisoned her. Nothing without me. They had echoed in her head during sleepless nights, during the loneliness of hospital visits, during the endless hours working menial jobs to feed her babies. But tonight, surrounded by witnesses, she realized she no longer feared his words. Tonight, she would speak her truth. She stepped forward, her voice trembling at first but gaining strength with every word. "You say I'm nothing without you, Ryan. But the truth is, I became everything without you." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Emily lifted her chin, her eyes glistening. "When you threw me out, I was pregnant. Not with one child, but with 3. Triplets." She paused, pulling her children closer so every guest could see their innocent faces. "These are your children, Ryan. You left me to raise them alone." Gasps echoed across the ballroom. A woman near the front clasped her pearls, whispering, "My God, he abandoned his own children." Emily's voice wavered, but she pressed on. "While you dined in luxury, I worked nights scrubbing offices, folding laundry, babysitting for strangers. My hands cracked from cleaning chemicals, my back ached, my body was exhausted, but I kept going. Not for me, for them." She glanced down at her children, her eyes softening. "Every tear I swallowed, every meal I skipped, every sleepless night, it was all so they would never feel unwanted, so they would never think they were a mistake." The room blurred as tears filled her eyes. She let them fall. "You told me I ruined your life, Ryan. But these children didn't ruin mine. They saved it. They gave me a reason to stand when you wanted me broken. And tonight, I will no longer hide their faces. I will no longer hide my pain. Because the world deserves to know the truth. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed them." The crowd erupted in outrage, voices overlapping. Shameful. How could he abandon his own blood? She raised them alone while he threw parties? Ryan's face twisted, sweat pouring down his temples. "She's lying," he shouted, desperation seeping into every word. "Those brats. How do you know they're mine?" But even as he spoke, the resemblance was undeniable. The same sharp jawline, the same dark eyes. Gasps turned into murmurs of certainty. No one doubted Emily now. Alexander stepped closer, his hand resting on Emily's shoulder, his voice firm. "She doesn't need to prove anything. Anyone with eyes can see the truth, and the truth will outlast every lie you've built." Emily's tears sparkled under the chandeliers, but her voice held steady as she delivered her final words. "You tried to erase me, Ryan, but in these children, you can never erase yourself. They are living proof of who you are and who you failed to be." The room thundered with applause, some guests even standing, their faces wet with tears. Emily's revelation had pierced through the glittering facade, exposing the raw humanity buried beneath the wealth and lies. And in that moment, it wasn't Ryan's wealth or Alexander's power that commanded the room. It was Emily's truth. The ballroom quaked with noise, gasps, accusations, the buzz of scandal spreading like fire. Emily's revelation had torn the last mask from Ryan's face. The guests, once dazzled by his wealth, now stared with disgust. But Ryan Mitchell wasn't the type to surrender. He slammed his glass down on the nearest table, shattering it into shards. "Enough!" he roared, his voice echoing through the hall. "You all think you know the truth? You believe her? A bitter ex-wife? You believe him? A meddling billionaire?" He jabbed a finger at Alexander. "You're all blind. I built this empire. Me, and I won't let anyone tear it down." His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through, but still he pressed on. "You call me a criminal? Prove it. Where are the police? Where are the judges? This is my wedding, my life, and none of you." Before he could finish, the ballroom doors burst open. 2 uniformed officers strode inside, their badges gleaming under the chandeliers. Behind them followed a stern-faced detective in a dark suit, his presence commanding immediate silence. Guests whispered in shock, some clutching their pearls, others recording on their phones, eager to capture history in the making. Ryan's face went pale. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice trembling. The detective stepped forward, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. His voice was calm, authoritative. "Ryan Mitchell, you are under investigation for embezzlement, tax fraud, and money laundering. We have a warrant for your arrest." Gasps erupted again, louder than before. Cameras flashed, guests scrambled to get a clear view. Ryan staggered back, shaking his head. No, this isn't happening. This is a mistake. This is Harrington's doing." Alexander's eyes narrowed, his arms crossed. "No, Ryan, this is justice catching up to you." Ryan turned wildly to the crowd, seeking sympathy, allies, anyone to defend him. But the same investors who once praised him now averted their eyes. Politicians slipped quietly out the back doors. Even his closest groomsmen stepped aside, unwilling to be dragged into his fall. "No!" Ryan shouted, lunging forward as the officers closed in. "Vanessa, where is she? Vanessa, help me!" His voice cracked into a pathetic cry. But Vanessa was gone, and everyone knew it. The officers seized his arms, cuffing him with swift precision. He struggled, thrashing, his once confident facade shattered into a frenzy of denial. "This isn't fair. I'm Ryan Mitchell. You can't do this to me. I made millions. I made history." The detective's voice cut through his panic. "You made a mess, and now you'll answer for it." The crowd erupted into murmurs, some shaking their heads in disgust, others whispering that it was long overdue. Emily watched, her children clutching her tightly. For years she had prayed for justice, for the world to see Ryan's true face. And now, in front of chandeliers and cameras, he stood exposed, not as a triumphant groom, but as a criminal dragged from his own wedding in handcuffs. Ryan's eyes locked on Emily as the officers pulled him away. Hatred and fear burned in his gaze. "This isn't over," he spat, his voice echoing as he was forced toward the doors. "You'll regret this, Emily. You'll all regret this." But his threats fell hollow, drowned out by the sound of the guests' disgusted murmurs and the clicking of handcuffs. And as the doors slammed shut behind him, the ballroom exhaled in collective relief. Ryan Mitchell had entered the night as a groom. He was leaving as a prisoner. While Ryan was dragged out of the ballroom in handcuffs, Vanessa Brooks was already halfway down the marble steps outside the Beverly Hills Grand Hotel. Her heart pounded, her heels clattering against the stone as photographers swarmed around her. She tried to shield her face, but the flashes were relentless. "Vanessa, did you know about the embezzlement? Are you leaving him on your wedding night? Was this all for money?" Their voices pierced her composure. She had dreamed of this night as her crowning moment, the night she would ascend into the glittering world of wealth and power. Instead, she was fleeing in shame, her designer gown dragging across the pavement, her diamond ring abandoned on the ballroom floor. She ducked into a waiting car, shoving the door closed as cameras pounded against the glass. Her hands trembled as she dialed her phone, desperation clawing at her. "Victor, pick up," she hissed. Victor was her secret safety net, a wealthy investor she had been flirting with behind Ryan's back. If Ryan's empire collapsed, she had counted on Victor to scoop her up. But when he finally answered, his tone was icy. "Vanessa, do you think I'm blind? Your name is all over the headlines already. Do you know what this scandal would do to me? Please, Victor, listen, she begged. I had nothing to do with this. Ryan lied to me too. I'm free now, I can be with you. He cut her off with a bitter laugh. Free? You're radioactive. No one wants to be near you. My reputation is worth more than your face. Don't call me again. The line went dead. Vanessa stared at the screen, her stomach sinking. One by one, she tried others, friends, fellow models, wealthy acquaintances, but each call ended the same. Some didn't answer at all. Others dismissed her coldly. Doors that had once opened eagerly for her were now slamming shut. By the next morning, the tabloids had already christened her the gold-digging bride. Pictures of her storming out of the hotel plastered every cover, headlines dripping with mockery. From diamonds to dust, Vanessa Brooks abandons groom in scandal. Fashion brands she modeled for quietly dropped her. Influencer deals vanished. And as if fate wasn't cruel enough, creditors began circling. Vanessa had lived on luxury she couldn't afford. Her credit cards maxed out, her designer wardrobe bought on borrowed money. Without Ryan's stolen millions propping her up, her glamorous life crumbled overnight. Within weeks, she was forced to sell her gowns, her jewelry, even her car. Paparazzi captured her in plain clothes, hair undone, no makeup, an image the world devoured with vicious glee. The same people who once praised her beauty now jeered at her downfall. Alone in a dingy apartment far from the glittering world she had once coveted, Vanessa stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror. The woman staring back wasn't the radiant bride of a millionaire. She was just another cautionary tale. For the first time, she realized the truth. She had built her future on someone else's lies, and when those lies crumbled, so did she. Vanessa Brooks thought she was climbing into a throne. Instead, she had chained herself to a sinking ship. And now, with no wealth, no allies, and no love, she had nothing left but the bitter taste of her own downfall. The ballroom was quieter now, though the weight of everything that had happened still hung in the air. Ryan was gone, dragged out in handcuffs. Vanessa had stormed off into disgrace. What remained was the stunned silence of 100 witnesses, investors, politicians, socialites, all staring at Emily Carter, the woman they once thought of as nothing. Emily stood at the center of it all, her triplets clinging to her gown, Alexander steady at her side. For years she had carried her pain in silence. For years she had cried in the dark so no one would see. And now, in the glow of the chandeliers, she felt a release so powerful it almost buckled her knees. Her children looked up at her with wide, innocent eyes, sensing that something monumental had just shifted. One of her sons tugged at her hand. "Mommy, are we safe now?" He whispered. Tears blurred her vision. She crouched down, gathering them in her arms, pressing kisses to their soft hair. "Yes, babies," she choked, her voice breaking. "We're safe now. Mommy kept her promise." The crowd, moved by the rawness of the moment, fell silent again. Some wiped their eyes discreetly. Others clutched their hearts, ashamed for ever believing Ryan's lies about her. For Emily, memories crashed like waves. Nights of rocking 3 babies to sleep while her stomach growled with hunger. Days of working until her fingers bled, praying she wouldn't collapse before the shift ended. The humiliation of being whispered about, judged, pitied. The pain of watching Ryan's success plastered across magazines while she clipped coupons to survive. And yet, she had survived. More than that, she had endured. She rose slowly, her tears no longer a mark of shame, but of triumph. She looked out over the crowd, her voice steady. "For a long time, I believed I was weak, that I was nothing without him. But tonight, I stand here to tell you, I was wrong. Strength isn't measured by wealth or status. It's measured by what you survive. And I survived everything he tried to destroy me with." Applause broke out, hesitant at first, then swelling like a wave. The sound washed over her, a balm to wounds that had festered for years. Emily turned to Alexander, her eyes shimmering. "Why?" she whispered. "Why did you help me? You didn't owe me anything." Alexander's expression softened, his own pain flickering in his gaze. "Because I've seen what cruelty can do," he said quietly. "I saw it happen to my mother. I watched it take my wife. And when I saw you, Emily, I couldn't stand by and let history repeat itself. You deserve more than survival. You deserve peace. And maybe, just maybe, I do too." Her chest tightened, not from sorrow this time, but from the fragile beginnings of hope. For so long she had built walls around her heart, but Alexander's words chipped them away brick by brick. The applause continued, echoing through the grand hall like thunder. Emily let it wash over her, not as validation from strangers, but as confirmation of the truth she already knew. She had endured the fire, and she had come out stronger. For the first time in years, she felt lighter, as if the weight she carried alone had finally lifted. Emily Carter, once discarded, once forgotten, was free. The applause still echoed through the ballroom, but gradually it softened into a reverent hush. All eyes turned toward Alexander Harrington, who stood beside Emily like an anchor in a storm. His broad shoulders squared, his expression softened, and yet there was a fire in his gaze that made even the wealthiest guests fall silent. Alexander stepped forward, gently taking the microphone from the stand meant for wedding toasts. He turned to Emily, and in that moment, the glittering chandelier seemed to dim around her, leaving her as the only light in the room. "Tonight," Alexander began, his voice steady but rich with emotion, "we all witnessed truth. We saw a woman stand with courage against cruelty. We saw a mother protect her children with everything she had. Emily Carter, you are more powerful than you know, and you are not alone anymore." Emily's eyes widened, her breath catching. She clutched her children's hands, uncertain of what he was about to do. Alexander bent down to meet the triplets at their level. His gaze softened, his voice tender. "Children, I know I can never replace what was taken from you. But I promise you this, I will never abandon you. I will protect you, guide you, and love you as if you were my own." The crowd murmured, touched by the sincerity etched into every word. The triplets looked up at him with wide eyes. One of them whispered, "Really?" Alexander smiled, his lips trembling slightly with emotion. "Really?" Then he stood, turning back to Emily. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Gasps rippled through the audience. Emily's hand flew to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "Emily," Alexander said, his voice breaking for the first time, "I thought my heart had no room left for love. I buried it with my wife, with the pain of losing my mother, with the shadows of betrayal. But then I saw you. I saw your strength, your pain, and your unshakable love for your children, and something inside me healed. You reminded me that love isn't about perfection. It's about resilience, about never giving up." He dropped to one knee. The room held its breath. "I don't want to just stand beside you tonight. I want to stand beside you for the rest of my life. Emily Carter, will you marry me and let me be the father your children deserve?" The ballroom erupted in gasps, then silence again as every guest leaned forward, desperate to hear her answer. Emily's tears spilled freely now, cascading down her cheeks. She had spent so long believing she was unworthy of love, that no one would ever choose her again. And yet here he was, a man who had known pain, who understood loss, who saw her not as broken, but as whole. She dropped to her knees in front of him, her children pressing close, and whispered through her tears, "Yes, yes, I will." Applause thundered through the hall, louder than anything that had come before. Guests stood, clapping, some wiping their own eyes. The triplets squealed with joy, wrapping their little arms around Alexander. He laughed, pulling all of them, Emily and the children, into his embrace. And for the first time in years, Emily felt what she thought she had lost forever. Hope for a future filled not with fear, but with love. The wedding Ryan planned to showcase his triumph had transformed into Emily's rebirth. And this time it was love, not cruelty, that stole the spotlight. The ballroom, once a stage for Ryan's arrogance, now glowed with a different kind of energy. The tension that had suffocated the air only an hour earlier had lifted, replaced with applause, cheers, and tears of joy. Emily and Alexander stood hand in hand, the triplets clinging happily to their mother's gown, while the crowd, those same witnesses who had expected her humiliation, rose to their feet in admiration. Guests pressed forward, not with judgment, but with heartfelt congratulations. A prominent investor approached first, bowing his head slightly toward Emily. "Mrs. Carter, forgive me. I believed his lies. But tonight, you showed us all what true strength looks like." He reached down, shaking Alexander's hand firmly. "And Harrington, you've chosen wisely." Others followed, offering words of support, some even tearfully apologizing for the gossip they had once spread. Women in glittering gowns embraced Emily, telling her she had given them courage. Men who had once toasted Ryan now clapped Alexander on the back, acknowledging his honor. For Emily, the flood of validation was overwhelming. Years of whispers and ridicule had carved wounds deep inside her, but now those same mouths spoke words of respect. It felt surreal. For the first time in years, she wasn't surviving in silence. She was celebrated. The orchestra, unsure of what to do, tentatively picked up their instruments. At Alexander's subtle nod, they shifted from Mozart to something gentler, warmer. The music swirled through the hall, no longer a soundtrack for vanity, but for victory. "Dance with me," Alexander murmured. Emily blinked, startled. "Here? Now?" He smiled softly. "Why not? Tonight is yours. Let the world see it." He led her to the center of the marble floor. The crowd encircled them, watching as Alexander placed a steady hand on her waist, guiding her into the rhythm. Emily hesitated at first, self-conscious under the chandeliers, but his reassuring gaze melted her fear. Slowly, her body relaxed, and she let herself move with him. The triplets clapped their tiny hands, giggling, before being lifted onto the arms of nearby guests who delighted in entertaining them. The sight of Emily dancing, radiant and unbroken, brought tears to many eyes. It wasn't just a dance, it was a declaration. A woman once discarded was now cherished, her dignity restored before all. As the song ended, the applause returned, louder than before. Alexander leaned close, whispering so only she could hear. "This is just the beginning. From now on, every celebration will be yours." Emily's heart swelled. For so long she had carried the burden of survival alone. To be promised joy, to be promised a future of light, felt like the sweetest gift she could imagine. When she looked around the room, she saw something remarkable. The humiliation Ryan had planned had backfired so completely that it had transformed into a coronation. Emily was no longer the poor ex-wife. She was a mother, a survivor, and now the woman standing beside one of the most powerful men in the city. And more importantly, she was finally standing tall on her own. Guests raised their glasses in unison. "To Emily," someone shouted. "To courage, to love." The toast echoed through the grand hall. Glasses clinked, laughter rang, and for the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to laugh too. What began as a night designed to break her had turned into the night that built her anew, and the celebration was only just beginning. Outside the Grand Hotel, flashing red and blue lights painted the night. Ryan Mitchell was shoved into the back of a police car, his wrists bound in steel. His shouts echoed down the street, but no one listened anymore. The world he had built on stolen money and shattered trust had collapsed, and all that remained was the cold reality of prison walls waiting for him. The next morning, headlines exploded across every paper and website. Groom arrested at his own wedding. Details of his embezzlement spread like wildfire. Offshore accounts, tax evasion, laundering millions through shell companies. Former allies turned their backs, investors withdrew, and his company crumbled overnight. By the end of the week, the name Ryan Mitchell was synonymous with fraud. In jail, he raged, blaming everyone but himself. He cursed Emily for showing up, cursed Alexander for exposing him, cursed Vanessa for abandoning him. But in the quiet of his cell, when no one was left to hear his fury, the truth clawed at him. He had destroyed himself. Vanessa's fate was no kinder. After her dramatic exit, she tried desperately to cling to the scraps of her glamorous life. But one by one, doors slammed in her face. Brands dropped her, friends ghosted her, and even the men she had flirted with for security turned away. The tabloids devoured her downfall, from bride to betrayed. Within months, Vanessa was bankrupt. Creditors hounded her, debts piled high, and the luxury she once flaunted turned into a bitter memory. She sold her gowns, her jewelry, even the designer handbags she once mocked Emily for not affording. Alone in a rundown apartment with no friends left, she stared at her reflection in a cracked mirror, realizing she had become the very thing she despised, forgotten and discarded. While Ryan and Vanessa drowned in their ruin, Emily's world blossomed. In the days after the wedding, people who had once whispered behind her back now spoke her name with respect. Articles praised her bravery, calling her a mother's strength personified. Invitations to charity events and women's foundations arrived at her door, each asking her to share her story of resilience. But Emily wasn't interested in fame. What mattered most were the small things. Tucking her children into bed without fear, waking up to the sound of their laughter, instead of anxiety, knowing she no longer had to fight every battle alone. Alexander stood beside her through it all. He didn't just promise love, he proved it. He held the children's hands on their walks to school, cheered at their little milestones, and quietly supported Emily in building a future of her own. He encouraged her to start the foundation she had once dreamed of, a program to help single mothers find work, shelter, and dignity. Together, they poured their pain into purpose. One evening, weeks after the scandal, Emily stood on the balcony of Alexander's home, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold. Her children played in the garden below, their laughter ringing like music. Alexander joined her, his hand warm in hers. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. She turned to him, her eyes clear. "No, everything I went through, it broke me, yes, but it also made me stronger, and it brought me here, to them, to you." For the first time in years, Emily's heart was light. The past no longer haunted her, the shame no longer chained her. Ryan and Vanessa had lost everything. Emily had gained everything that mattered. And that was the sweetest justice of all. Months passed, but the night of Ryan's downfall remained etched in everyone's memory. The story of the groom arrested at his own wedding became a parable told across the city. People whispered about his arrogance, laughed at Vanessa's betrayal, and admired the quiet strength of the woman who had once been dismissed as nothing. Emily Carter no longer walked with her shoulders hunched or her eyes lowered. She carried herself with dignity, not because of the gowns or the applause, but because she had finally recognized her own worth. Every morning she woke to the sound of her children's laughter, their tiny voices reminding her why she had fought so hard. Their smiles were her crown, their love her treasure. With Alexander by her side, Emily began to dream again. Together, they launched a foundation for single mothers, women abandoned, overlooked, and ridiculed, just as she once had been. The foundation offered shelter, education, and work opportunities. Most importantly, it offered hope. Standing on stages before crowds, Emily told her story, not with shame, but with pride. Each time she saw tears in the eyes of women who finally realized they weren't alone. But Emily knew her journey wasn't just about inspiring others. It was about healing herself. Late at night, after the children were asleep, she and Alexander would sit by the fire, speaking softly about their scars. He told her of his mother's suffering, his wife's final battle with cancer, and the loneliness that had nearly swallowed him. She shared her darkest nights, her fear of failing as a mother, her moments of hopelessness. In those quiet hours, they found not just love, but understanding. Two wounded souls, no longer defined by their pain, but strengthened by it. As for Ryan and Vanessa, their names faded into infamy. Ryan's trial ended in conviction, his once proud empire reduced to ashes. Vanessa drifted further into obscurity, a cautionary tale of greed and betrayal. Neither could escape the shadow of their choices. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire and gold, Emily gathered her children on the porch of their new home. Alexander stood behind her, his arm wrapped warmly around her shoulders. The children laughed as they pointed at the glowing clouds, calling them castles in the sky. Emily smiled, her eyes wet with quiet joy. She whispered to herself words she wished she had believed long ago. "I am not weak, I'm not broken, I am enough." She turned to Alexander, her voice steady. "Do you know what the greatest victory is?" He tilted his head. "What?" "It's not revenge. It's not seeing them fall. It's knowing I rose. It's choosing to live fully, love deeply, and never again doubt my worth." Alexander kissed her forehead. His answer simple, "And you'll never have to doubt it again." The triplets ran into her arms, giggling, their joy pure and boundless. Emily held them close, her heart swelling with gratitude. For all the pain, for all the loss, life had brought her to this moment of peace. And so the story that began with cruelty ended with compassion. The tale of betrayal transformed into a lesson of resilience. To every woman watching, Emily's journey carried one final message. You are stronger than the storms that try to break you. And no matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how heavy the pain, there is always a tomorrow where you can rise again. So that's how the story ends, my wonderful friends. You're still here with me until this moment, aren't you? If you really stayed this far, it means something inside this story touched your heart in a way you can't quite explain. And maybe, just maybe, it reminded you of your own strength. Life often brings us betrayal, pain, and moments when we feel abandoned. But as the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Emily's journey shows us that no matter how cruel the world can be, we are never powerless. We can rise, heal, and even turn our deepest wounds into the very source of our courage. So tonight, let this story remind you, you are stronger than the storms that try to break you. You deserve love, dignity, and a future brighter than your past. If this touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need hope, and subscribe to our channel. Because here, we tell stories that don't just entertain. They remind us how to keep going and how to rise again.